Grab a cup of joe, buckle up, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Let's get rolling.
All right, welcome back to Rhythm of the Road podcast. I know that you've seen this person here before, but we have something completely different in mind. And we thought of you, the listener, the watcher, the looker on, about talking about this idea about media. And since Nell and I live in this kind of huge media space in different lanes and in different ideas and different creative spaces, like, what if we just mixed it all together? So, welcome to the first episode of the Mixed Media series. And you're going to see this. I think we decided about every 10 episodes. So it's on the fives, right? So like you can clock it, right? This is episode 45. You're going to see us again on episode 55 talking about this whole idea of mixed media. And to be honest, we don't even know what it's going to be like yet. And so welcome back to the show. Now, it's always a pleasure having you on here. And
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited. I love the fact that we don't really have, like, quote unquote, a plan.
yeah, this is completely unscripted. So everybody watching and listening, you just need to know this is unscripted. And here is our prompt for the day. Maybe this is how we
Yes.
begin. We're
Yeah.
going to flesh it out as we go. And here's the question I'm going to pose to you, Nell, and then this will be our jumping off point.
Okay.
Are some people so creative they can't think outside the box?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it could be interpreted in many different ways. I think that we associate logic with the proverbial box, right? So anything inside that box is considered logical, meaning if I do X plus Y, it equals Z. And anything outside of that is like uncharted territory and a little uncomfortable for some people. But as a creative, if we spend all of our time outside the perimeter of said box and we never actually step foot in because that's uncomfortable for a lot of creatives, what are we doing here? What does it mean?
Right. And it's almost like we spend so much time trying to avoid that.
Right.
Like we're chasing this idea. I know I talk to a lot of music folks in the creative space of like songwriting or producing or how do I make the next best sound or how do I create this new song? And I always think back, like, everybody since Bach is just copying Bach. Like, there's only 12 notes. There's
Yeah.
only so many chord combinations that make sense so that you can make something that's singable that actually people want to listen to over and over and
Yeah.
over, right? Because that's the adventure. But like, isn't that okay? Like, because the part that we're inserting, and you and I talk about this a lot, is the creative is what makes that the difference. It's what makes
Right.
it a viable product or a
Mm-hmm.
sound or a creative idea or defines
Right.
that artist as that artist.
So I mean, it's true that in most popular music, it's basically the same, what, four or five chords?
Yeah, that might be an extension. I mean, kind of 3 to 4 is that'd be sophisticated.
Wow. Okay. So it's really how you choose to use those three or four chords is the creative part of it. I think that coming from a business perspective, as business owners, especially as creative business owners, it's challenging because that logical box that I was mentioning is where all of your your QuickBooks stuff is and your email newsletters and all the things that you're supposed to be doing as a business owner to get more business and run your business successfully is really difficult because usually we segregate the creative mind versus the logical mind. And the creative mind just wants to focus on the work. And I'm incredibly lucky in our business that my husband Kenny does a lot of our logical work. And, but I think, I mean, especially when you're solopreneur, you have to learn how to do it all.
Hmm.
And how do you get to a place where you can, as a creative, work yourself into that logical space without losing or fear of losing creativity? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, the fear is always we're going to leave that creative space and like,
Yeah.
right? Because we talk about the creative high, right? Like, and really what that creative high, it's dopamine, right? We all have it in our
Mm-hmm.
bodies, but we want that constant dopamine hit. And like submitting invoices and expenses and paying quarterly taxes and calling clients because they didn't pay an invoice and
Snooze fest.
yeah, like you can just feel the energy in both of our rooms going
I know.
down.
I was like, oh, I'm starting to tune out.
No Debbie Downer here. But are there ways that we can be creative and think outside of that box for those things? There's other
Right.
tools, there's other folks, you're lucky you have your husband is able to kind of parallel and be that support. I don't have that support, at least in my business, because she has her own business. And
Right.
so, and neither of us like to do those things. However, they're that necessary part,
Yeah.
and I wonder what, I think because so much of your time is spent in the visual space,
Yeah.
and you're spending lots of screen time and you're making all these wonderful videos and bringing imagery to life. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, there's nothing life-giving about entering invoices in QuickBooks, like, or
No, but
creating a
it's,
newsletter or,
I mean, so it's funny. It's interesting that you say that. There's nothing life giving about that.
Mhm,
So before I actually fully accepted the fact that I was a creative person and started doing all of this full time, the majority of my friends were very logical, routine thinkers.
mm,
And now I look at those friends in the way that they operate differently. And to them, doing spreadsheets and invoicing and all of those things that we consider not life
mhm,
giving are life giving to them.
mhm.
And I look now and I think, wow, how does this person survive doing the same thing every day? And to me, I don't want to call it mindless, but it's so routine that it becomes mindless because it's no longer a challenge.
Right. And I think what you just hit on the head right there is it's not a challenge. It doesn't keep our brain wanting to work or wanting to learn or,
Right.
you know, I don't know about you, but like I've been trying to push myself out of my own creative box lately and challenge myself to experience things outside of my norm. So whether
Yes.
that's um, finding new artists. Now,
Hmm.
whether that's from a performing arts, whether that's from like visual arts, so like paintings and
Hmm.
those kinds of things, or in the video space, like starting to try to appreciate what
Hmm.
is the creative effort that went into that, and is that a piece, or is that something that I can take into my own space,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like. Um, I'm getting a little bit more time back in my in my week. Some of my weeks run pretty full. But I think that's important to honor your creative self in the fact that you need to keep pushing that envelope
Hmm.
because and experiencing what is out there, without feeling like the ever dooming imposter syndrome. Like, well, that person is this and that person is this. I
Yeah.
read a wonderful quote literally right before we got on here, and it says, if you are working out at the gym,
Hmm.
there is always going to be a person to your right that is in way better shape than you and
Hmm.
works out harder and has the look that you're in the middle of working towards. But then there's always
Yeah.
going to be someone to the left looking at you going, man, I wish I had what he or she had.
Why is it so difficult to remember the latter part of what you just said?
Yes.
versus the first part. Why is that so difficult?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And I think sometimes, like, and we go through seasons, right? Like we go through
Mhm.
like a seasons of like, yeah, like, can I just get to there? Like, I know I have to do all the work, but I just want to be there.
Mhm.
And honestly, sometimes for me, when I get to those spaces, I find myself looking to the left and going, who can I help to get to where I am?
Mm, that's interesting.
Who can
That
I
is
help to get
interesting.
to where I am, or provide some guidance or mentorship or something of that nature
Yeah.
in this space over here? Because ultimately, that is what elevates you.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I guess I don't know that I started doing that consciously. I think I started doing that subconsciously. And I'm working on a project right now, which is basically myself and my friend Kelly. We recognize that we are at a place
Hmm.
and thought, you know what? There's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of uncertainty and overwhelm. And we're in a place now where we can help people with this, and it's content creation. And I mean, my gosh, when you actually take a look inside and step back and recognize what you've accomplished and what you've done, you think, you know what? I am at a place where I can help somebody elevate their own life or skills or whatever they're looking to accomplish. So that's really interesting. But I mean, I almost feel like it's a not a switch, but how do you get to that place where you start to recognize that yes, you do have something to offer to help somebody else?
For me, it kind of just shows up sometimes. Like I
Yeah.
was in a couple meetings yesterday and I just started talking, and then I call them light bulb moments, and you can see them
Hmm.
on people's faces where their face lights up or their eyes lift, and they're like the kind of the aha moments. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a place I could go deeper and
Yeah.
provide, and then you do, but it has to happen enough times for you to recognize that that's what's happening
Hmm.
and that you should. I think sometimes people see that and they're like, oh, cool, I helped them. Now I can move on. No,
Mm.
what you really did was just open a door. Then now you have to actually walk through that door and do the
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
then if then you need to leave, that's fine. But when you walk in that door and you help that person or do that thing or have that collaboration or see that there's an opportunity, walk through it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And collaboration is a big part of that. And I know you're a big fan of collaboration.
Huge.
You've talked about that several times on your podcast. And that's huge, especially when we're talking about creatives, because I mean, my gosh, it's like a creative volcano is erupting. Like you get visuals and ideas and all these types of things together in one space, and it's like, how can something amazing not occur?
Right. Because you're just one person. You can only have had so many experiences. You can only have done so many things. But there's something about even bringing one person into it
Hmm.
that is such a game changer in the fact that that person might get you or prompt you to something that neither of you could have ever
Hmm.
discovered unless you had entered into that collaborative experience. I would
Right.
imagine that you and Kelly are having opportunities to experience that. Like you're like, well, we had this idea and this plan, but wow, it's actually grown to this, and this as a result
Hmm.
of us having these conversations and developing this content and having these opportunities to be, I use the word in proximity, right? Because so much of what we do now is in a virtual space. So I just say in
Yeah.
proximity, not necessarily together, but in proximity to be able to make that a reality for everyone.
Right, exactly. And the more that you collaborate and do all of that, I mean, there's always somebody that's thinking of something that you're not.
Hmm.
And so it makes ideas whole and completes the circle of what you're trying to accomplish, I think, and more efficiently. Or I don't know where I'm going with that exactly, but it makes sense. I mean, it really does.
Well, and I had a thought as you said that, and especially as to like where do we go with that in terms of like when you enter into a collaboration, how tough is it for you to get out of your own way? How hard
Oh,
is it for you to accept the fact that you are having to think outside of your own box
yeah.
because someone is forcing you and like literally pulling you outside of it? And like, what does that feel like to be outside of that comfort zone?
Yeah.
And what
Basically not having control over it.
weird
I mean, control. We could do an entire episode on control.
episode. We could do a series on control.
We could absolutely. It would be a really long episode.
Yeah, we'll break that up.
Yeah. No, and what you said, so somebody pulling you out of your comfort zone is one thing, and then you pulling yourself out of your comfort zone is another thing. And you had mentioned working with different artists, and whether it's performing arts or not, I tend to like to pull myself out of my comfort zone in other areas of my life. But I do like to do it, like, for instance, with cooking. I do, and to me, cooking is a form of art. And it's
100%.
also a de-stressor, and that's how I try to come down from my day if I've had a really exhausting day. And I've said this before, you know what kind of a day I've had by what type of a meal I make. The more complicated and the more ingredients, the more flavor there is, it's been a bad day. You should probably watch out.
That's an interesting correlation.
It's I don't know. It's this weird thing where the more of a challenge that I've had during the day, the more of a challenge I want to give myself at the end of the day. Because I think I'm just pulling myself out of whatever it was that was making me so uncomfortable by getting even more uncomfortable, but I have control over that comfort level.
So it's really the control, Nell, is what you're saying here.
So here we are, back to control.
Because I'm the opposite. Like if I've had like an overly full, stressful, just like really growth opportunity sort of day, like
Mhm.
I want to unplug everything. Like
Yeah.
I don't like I don't want to use the word escape, but that's probably the best way to describe it. But it
Yeah.
literally, it's not like I have to have some sort of out of body experience or like
Mhm.
I need to, but it's like I need to unplug. I need my space.
Mhm.
I only need my people,
Mhm.
not other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And if
That's
you know
interesting.
anything about inner circles and moving words out, like it can only be inner circle people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even if those inner circle people need interaction and we need to be part of that, like that is okay. But anything
Yeah.
outside of that, like no go.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking up your capacity
Mm-hmm.
and your brain power, which has already been decreased from a challenging day. So you have to limit yourself and set that boundary to be able to recover,
Yeah.
I guess. So what I'm taking away from this conversation so far is we've got a couple of tips. So in order to combat that fear of losing creativity, number one, challenge yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, figure out how you can accurately recover in your own way to maintain your sense of creativity.
Right. Because do you
Interesting.
go through seasons of creative exhaustion where
Ooh,
where you
yeah.
just want to step away?
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So, this is interesting because it's kind of like I'm having this like epiphany moment here. For me, it almost seems like stepping away from a short term challenge is where I want to challenge myself even more. But if I'm truly, truly creatively exhausted, that's where I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to leave my house. I don't want to have any interaction. I don't even want an electronic near me. I don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to see a TV. I want nothing.
Right. So I'm curious. Why does it feel like it needs to be a nothingness? Is it because it was an all and now it needs to be a nothing?
I think so. And silence has more of an impact, I think, because anymore, especially these days with so much access to anything, we're constantly hearing things and seeing things. There's just stuff going on all around us. Silence is a gift.
Mm.
And it's also something that a lot of people are afraid of.
Yeah, I find that to be very true. I can do this for hours, ride in a car with no sound and not have a conversation with the people that are in the car.
Yeah,
Like that makes some
100%.
people very, very uncomfortable. They're like, they just have to be
Yeah.
constantly talking. I'm like, you don't need to. Yes, this is a space, but you don't have to fill it.
Yeah, I had a job that caused me to travel quite a bit, and I did a lot of regional travel too. And I would always be in the car with my boss, and my boss didn't listen to the radio, didn't listen to anything. So I always found myself on these trips in silence. And I didn't really know it at first because I'd just been accustomed to always listening to something when you get in a car.
Mhm.
And when we started this, like the silence thing, I was like, oh, this is weird. And then I got used to it and it happened more and more. And I started to really enjoy it. And sometimes now I'll catch myself being in a car with nothing on. And like Kenny will say to me, oh, do you want to put some music on? I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't anything.
Yeah. We have that similar conversation because Tracy likes to drive a lot with nothing on
Mm,
because she has lots of talking going on all day for her job
yeah.
and receiving lots of auditory information. And so, and when I get into my car, like I want to hear something because what that does is it allows my brain to focus on that and to shut off whatever may or may not else be going on. So when we're in the
Yeah.
car together, it depends on which vehicle we're in, whether the radio's on or the radio's off. But
Yeah.
what we recently discovered really is that her car stereo sounds way better than mine. And so when she's in mine, the sound quality of mine makes her so frustrated that she doesn't want to listen to stuff in my car either because of the sound
Oh.
quality. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is terrible. I like, right? The audio guy and the musician in the family have
I'm
the
thinking, where?
worst sounding audio system
How did this even happen? How did that get past your ears before it left the lot?
because the most important part was, can it transport my drums in an inside space?
Okay, I get that.
And then miles per gallon.
Okay, I get that too. I get that more than the
And
drum thing.
then there was the audio had to come last, and at the moment it was fine. And now that the other two folks in my house have extremely better audio quality in their cars, I'm like, yeah, mine's
Huh.
pretty much
Do you think that some part of that
garbage.
was because you associate your car as, pardon the pun, a vehicle for your audio career,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't important to you at all to have high quality audio? I mean, I think it's assumed for people in creative spaces, especially when you're really good at something. For you, it's audio. For me, it's video. For somebody else, it could be, painting or whatever, that you have the best of the best in every area of your life
Mm-hmm.
in relation to what you do.
Right.
So people would assume that maybe I have like endless supplies of these Academy Award winning films and DVDs and the best video equipment and I won't watch a video on anything less than an 85-inch TV or something like that.
Sounds wonderful.
Like, I don't even consider when Kenny brings up the idea of getting a larger television somewhere in our house. I'm like, we don't need that.
Right.
Or like the best picture quality or something like that. I just don't. For me, sometimes video is, now, don't get me wrong, I love a good episode of The Real Housewives, but I don't need to be watching on the highest quality of equipment all the time because for me, I'm so immersed in it
Right.
that it's just not important in all areas of my life.
Right. And I think
So would you consider that?
Well, what we figured out, because it took us a while, but because we're intentional, we talk about this stuff. And
Yeah.
what we figured out is because my studio monitors sound so good.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the best listening situation I could have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need that in my vehicle
Right.
because nothing in my vehicle is going to sound like what I would have to spend $20,000 in my car to make them sound as good as what these do in this space. And that's just ridiculous. That's like you saying I have to have an 85-inch TV. You don't, right? And
Right.
so I can come in here if I need to listen to something that makes my ears sing. I
Mm-hmm.
just come in here and listen to it because it's incredible.
Yeah.
And then I just know that everywhere else is just going to be okay. And that's okay.
Yeah. That is okay. I mean, you could do what we used to do in the early 2000s and put the system in your car, you know?
Well, I priced it out. It's about $20,000 now. I'm not going to do that in my car.
Is that what it is these days? This is highway robbery.
Well, that's the system that I want. Maybe
I
not the
mean,
90s your trunk bounces up and down system like my daughter has.
okay, okay. So kids are still doing that these days?
Yeah, you can hear my daughter from about 3.5 blocks away when she's coming
Oh
home.
my gosh. I remember the days of like the Alpine head units and like the Pioneer subwoofers
Yep,
and
she's got a
all the things.
big old subwoofer in her little Toyota Corolla, and I think if you turn that thing up too loud, the back end's gonna bounce up and down.
that was a part of my life at one point
But
too.
she loves it because she loves the music and what it does for her as a person, and so
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. Look how far we've evolved outside of the box of
Here we
what
are.
we were planning on to talk about. That's the great part about podcasting.
It can go anywhere. And
Yes.
I think you hit on some important points already, but also like knowing what you need inside and outside of your creative space.
Yes.
Like you don't need to live in your creative space all of the time.
No.
It's like when I go to listen to live bands, like people are like, how can you listen to this band? They sound awful. I'm like, I'm not listening actively. It's sound.
Right.
I can shut that off. I didn't used to be able to, but now I can just shut it off. But if it's a really good band, you'll see my demeanor change, of course, because I will physically react to that. But I think it's important to know that it's okay to shut it off once in a while. Like you don't need to live in this creative space ad nauseum. And
No.
it's okay to take those breaks. Like sometimes people are like, when I'm working with them on a project, they're like, is everything going okay? Like, are we moving forward? I'm like, yeah, sometimes I need time to just live with the material. I need to live with the things. I know for video in the space that you're working in, a lot of times you're working on a little stricter timelines and deadlines. But I would imagine when you have the opportunity to do what I would consider a more creative piece, that you need time to live with that content and live with the ideas, and then they just need to ruminate, and you need to have experiences. And I think that's what makes us better creatives.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. The deadlines that I'm on are typically my less creative projects. And when there's something that I do need to be creative for in a different realm, the way that I typically work is I need to sit with it before I actually start physically working on it. And because I need to have an image or an idea in my head first. And I need to bring that fully to life. And that usually starts happening in the weeks leading up to when I'm planning on sitting down and doing it. And I've always worked better like this. And I don't know if maybe this is why in college I completely fell off the wagon and just decided that school wasn't for me, because typically school doesn't work with this timeline of
doesn't
productivity.
Work with the timeline.
No, but I need to have the idea fully ingrained in my brain first, and then I sit down to do it. Because the thing with video, and I'm sure you experience this with audio too, is the more you look at something, the more changes you're going to want to make to it. And if I started creating something over weeks on end, I'm going to go back to it every single day and change something. So if I give my brain time to function and process what I really want to see, I have an easier time putting that out into my digital space and then looking at it and going, and of course, making tweaks along the way. You have to, because things change, but it gives myself less time to see it and want to make unnecessary changes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because what that idea brings up a question for me that I have to ask myself all the time. When is it done?
Yes,
What is done? What do we define
yes,
as finished?
exactly.
Because the editing process can be never ending.
Hmm.
And here's what I've discovered about myself. Say you give yourself a 4 to 6 week kind of time frame. We're not going to call it a
Hmm.
deadline, but a time frame. You were a different person after 5 weeks than you were 5 weeks ago. And
Yep.
so you look at things different, you hear things different, you've experienced other things, and so it influences what you do.
Hmm.
And so this might be an opportunity for like a tactical episode in the future for this series of just talking
Hmm.
about some of these tactical pieces. But what I would say is, like, I really try to be like, this is what I envisioned for this project. And
Right.
so I need to stay within that vision, because there have been some projects that I've worked on for 3 to 4 years.
My
So
gosh.
imagine the different person and different experiences and skills that I've gained in those 3 to 4 years. Well, hopefully a lot,
Hmm.
but I need to go back in year 3.5 and work on that project that I started 3 years ago and have it feel, look, and have the same sort of cohesive
Yeah.
ideas that it did back then. And
Right.
which was really not fun to try to figure out, because you're like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, this one doesn't sound and look like anything like these do.
Right.
Well, yeah, because I'm a different person. Well, yeah, but I
Right.
want that. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to go back and redo. So, like, that's something that I had to discover about myself, because we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing and evolving and thinking outside of our own boxes
Hmm.
enough that sometimes we forget we have to create the box and live in it for a project.
Yeah. Yeah. That's see, okay, so now that's an interesting point there too. The box that we're talking about stepping out of, I mean, creating our own boxes
Yep.
is something that nobody focuses on. Yeah, that's really interesting. And if you think about, I mean, this is part of the reason why I like to travel too. And if you take a trip in the midst of a project anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing different things, you're meeting different people, you're having different conversations, and that's all life altering and changing too. And I mean, tastes change and all the things change. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And your experiences over the course of that length of time dictates where you go from there. And I mean, 3 or 4 years, then that's, what Hollywood films are taking. And,
Uh-huh.
the visualizations over that time period too change. And so, yeah, it's all very interesting. But yeah, that is a good question. When is a project done?
Mm-hmm.
What is finished?
What is finished? One could argue in the music, it's when the silence takes over.
You mean like just now?
That may, no, that was intentional. That was not a may or may not moment. That was definitely intentional, um, for the dramatic pause, so to speak.
Cue dramatic
That's
pause.
right. And if you need to extend that at all in the editing process, feel free. And then maybe some sort of loud buzzer moment that brings us back, so that we're not in some sort of state of euphoria for too long.
The dinner
The
bell.
dinner bell.
Yeah.
How about the dinner triangle? I prefer that over
I'd,
the bell.
I'd rather have the triangle. I recently just took a yoga class at the end of the class, and I hadn't heard this in a long time. She rang the triangle, and I was like, oh, I forgot how much I loved that sound.
It's so, I could go on at an nauseam for triangles. Well, I'm gonna try to stay on topic ish.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, it's a note. Is it F sharp that is typically like creates like calm in our brains?
Yeah. That's interesting.
And
Good
maybe
parallel.
that's why it's so comfortable.
Right. I mean, I do enjoy it. I always look at it like I probably just haven't found the right space with the right teacher, with the
Yeah.
right people
Yeah.
for me to have
Yeah.
that, basically that vulnerability to be in that space.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And think about that, like if you're collaborating with people in a creative space, like you have to be, it's about vulnerability. You have to be able to take risk and be open and have dumb ideas and have great ideas and be able to work through whatever that looks like and know that it's for the greater good of whatever the creative thing that you're working on is.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much like the full circle moment. And it's about vulnerability. It really is. Because as much as you're thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing this right on a yoga mat? You're also thinking it in the studio. Am I doing this right? Is this person going to like my idea? Or are the people going to like what we've accomplished here? Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think that's the mic drop moment for this episode now. And probably a good place to stick a button in it and or pin in it, whatever the
Inject
phrase is.
that intentional silence.
Right, exactly. And you know, thank you for being thank you for being willing and vulnerable enough to even start this crazy idea of this series. We've talked about it for a lot more months than not, to be honest, I think. And so, you know, you are all seeing and hearing this unfold literally in real time. And so thank you. Please leave a comment or send me a message or send Nell a message. Totally do that. And let us know what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. What are some topics that you'd like to hear? This idea of, you know, mixed media it can be anything. You know, I envision this like when you talk about mixed media in the art world or the visual art world, there's so many things put together. You're like, how does this even make sense together?
Right.
You don't have to make the sense of it. The artist did it. You just get to sit there and appreciate it and take it in and learn from it and pull from it what you want. And that's exactly what our goal is for these episodes. You're going to take from it what is right and good for you. Do me a favor, do Nell a favor, share it with one person. Because there's one person in your life that would love to hear this, or at least get a laugh out of us walking on our journey from thinking outside of the box to being in yoga class. If you like what you heard, click the like button, hit subscribe, leave me a review. Let me know what you liked and didn't like, because honestly, I want to know both, because both are valid, and that's what makes us better. It's what makes us better creatives, and I will see you down the road.
Thanks for cruising with me on this episode of Rhythm of the Road. Remember, the journey itself is the destination. Until next time, keep the rhythm flowing, and we'll see you down the road.